Facts First presents. Farmer stops playing nice after people invade and intrude his property, leading up to an insane police involvement. Before we get into this video, help us spread the word about Facts First by clicking that like button. Also be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our future videos. When a person sees a no parking sign, it's there because, well, somebody doesn't want you parking there. Makes sense, right? It could be a homeowner, a business owner, maybe city authorities. People are expected to obey the signs and not park where they're not supposed to. Unfortunately for one farmer, people refused to stop parking on his land. Davao Bedekovic loved the idea of living in a rural community. It was a peaceful place for him to live and farm his land. He lived in the small village of Jakusevec in Zagreb, Croatia. The village was scarcely populated, and it gave him the privacy and the personal space he needed to be happy. Unfortunately, he did not have good neighbors, and slowly his neighbors were getting on his nerves. He was the type of man who wanted things to run smoothly and peacefully, so he did his best to be patient with his neighbors. Davao owned a field near the center of the village where he grew crops. The town's population was increasing, and that meant that his business might start growing as well, which was great. With the growing population came a new market. It was right next to Davao's farmhouse, which he also thought would be great. The market was only a few minutes' walk from his front door. It would make his grocery shopping so much easier. The new market was very modern, and it would surely attract more tourists. When more tourists come, it means more money for business owners like Davao. And it wouldn't be long before Davao would realize that the new market, it would be more annoying than beneficial. The new supermarket opened, which was good news, but there was not a designated parking area. There were several other buildings in the area, which meant that shoppers had to park across the street. And that was inconvenient because shoppers didn't want to walk all that far to get to their cars. And as more and more people heard about this new modernized supermarket, the less parking spaces were available. People were often struggling to find places to park. This meant Davao would often find cars parked in the field near his farmhouse. Now at first, Davao would notice maybe one or two cars parked on his land. That wasn't a big issue until more and more shoppers heard about his field and they started parking there as well. Weekends became especially bad. There would be so many cars on his property he couldn't do his farm work. They were all in the way. It became such a hassle he decided he had to do something about it. When Davao asked the drivers nicely not to park on his property, most of them obliged. When he wasn't around to ask people to stay off his land, though, it ended up being converted into a parking lot again. He was running a farm. He didn't have time to shoo people away all day. He needed to come up with a plan to keep people off his property even when he wasn't around. Davao became more and more frustrated with each passing day. He would shoo cars away one day, he'd see that very same car a few days later. His patience was beginning to wear thin. His first thought was to slash all the tires on the vehicles that were parked on his field. He realized something like that could probably get him into some trouble, though. Next, he thought about putting up a fence, but then he realized that it'd be very expensive and it would reduce the driving space he had on his land. He needed to find a way to keep people from parking on his property that wouldn't make his life miserable. When Davao woke up in the morning and saw rows of cars parked on his property, he'd finally had it. He got into his tractor and he began digging trenches. He made it so that there were trenches on the front and rear of all the vehicles, making it difficult, practically impossible, for them to get their cars out. Davao didn't feel the least bit bad about doing this either. He had asked these same people again and again not to park on his property. They didn't listen. These people were getting exactly what they deserved. One of the drivers decided to try and drive out of the trench. She ended up getting her car stuck in the mud, and that made matters worse for her. Finally, she decided to call the police. When they arrived, she and a few other drivers asked to have Davao arrested. Well, after speaking to the farmer, they realized that there was really nothing they could do. The cars were on his property. The police couldn't tell him what he could or could not do on his own property. Since these people were parked on private property, Davao actually had the right to take legal action against them. After Davao dug the trenches, people from all around his farm heard about it. After hearing about the problems that the drivers on his property had, nobody wanted to park there ever again. Unfortunately, it took Davao digging up his property in order to finally come up with a solution, but he finally found a way to keep them off his land, and I guess that's what he wanted. And subscribe for more.